Penn State football fans. Bob Flounders joined by Johnny McGonigal. Johnny, the last time we talked, it is Tuesday, December 6th, late morning, as we do this blue-white breakdown. Last time we talked, we didn't know. We had there were a couple things in the air about Penn State, who they were going to play, what the transfer portal was going to look like, and it's all been magically cleared up. Who would be the Big Ten champion? Who would be in the playoff? All those questions, Johnny, have been answered. We still don't know the identity of the World Cup champion. I'm going to leave you to that. There's still a ways away in terms of that. But we have Army-Navy this weekend. We have some transfer portal news. We know where Penn State is headed. Where would you like to start? Do you want to start with where Penn State's headed, or where do you want to go?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's start with the Rose Bowl and playing Utah, Pac-12 champions, out in Pasadena. That's a heck of a reward for this Penn State team after going 10-2. For the seniors to go out that way, for the freshmen like Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Abdul Carter, to end their first collegiate season in Pasadena is pretty cool. And it'll be quite the stage for those freshman standouts to, if they haven't already, announced themselves to the country. And it should be a great occasion. And I believe it's the final, the Rose Bowl because of impending college football playoff stuff. And but look, this was a destination that had been, whispered about for a week or so. Hey, even if Ohio State doesn't make the playoff, will the Rose Bowl take Penn State over Ohio State? I think we both thought that's kind of how it was leaning, given Ohio State's recent activity in the Rose Bowl 2 of the last 4 years. But Ohio State ends up making the playoff after some USC Utah action on the Friday night of conference championship weekend. I thought the Trojans were going to get it done. They did not whatsoever. And so USC is out and Ohio State's in, and that leaves the Rose Bowl to Penn State.
Yeah, Michigan wins the Big Ten. They pull away from Purdue. Late cover the number with 2 minutes to go. Jim Harbaugh, Johnny, you know a little bit about gambling. Jim Harbaugh does not mind scoring late in games when the issue is already decided. He did that against Nebraska. He did it in the Purdue game. They are a tough team. They're going to have to do it without Blake Corum. They had a quarterback leave their program to go in the transfer portal to go to Iowa. So there's some news there, but it's a very tough, determined Michigan team that's going to play TCU. Ohio State, lucky Ohio State gets the Georgia Bulldogs. They're going to have to score a lot of points. I watched Georgia and LSU. That was an entertaining game that I thought the score wasn't really indicative of what LSU was able to do on that defense. They moved the ball. I just don't know about Ohio State's defense trying to slow down those Georgia Bulldogs. So let's talk about Penn State. First trip to the Rose Bowl since 2016 when Sam Darnold and those darn USC Trojans got them late. I think USC had a 14-point fourth quarter lead. Just couldn't hold it. Very exciting game. Saquon Barkley went off with one of his signature touchdown runs. But, Johnny, one of the things I wanted to talk about is, you don't know about player movement. You don't know exactly what this Penn State team is going to look like. We do know that Joey Porter won't be a part of the festivities. We do know that Christian Veilleur will not be part of the festivities. But, if there aren't too many key defections, I just went through it. This is I think it's one of the best bowl games available. I think it could be a very, very competitive game. Utah's not scared of anyone. They beat USC twice. They took a good Ohio State team to the limit in last year's Rose Bowl game. This looks like a tremendous matchup on paper.
Oh, I think outside of the playoff games, this might be the best bowl game we get. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing Troy and UTSA play. I think that'll be a fun game. It will be a fun game. Don't get me wrong. But I do think that this outside of the the two college football playoff semifinal games, I think it's gonna be can't miss TV. And I think the guys I mentioned earlier, Singleton, Allen, Carter, these young talents that people across the country are going to be tuning in to see. And it's not like they'll be opting out. Utah, they didn't have any opt-outs for their bowl game last year when they played in Pasadena. That's what Kyle Whittingham acknowledged on the Rose Bowl teleconference on Sunday night. James Franklin, said that he thinks that almost the entirety of his team will be playing in the Rose Bowl, and is the one big one being Joey Porter Jr., who I believe announced his decision to enter the NFL draft and forego the bowl game after we recorded last week.
Yeah.
We didn't get to talk about that a whole lot, but we both saw that coming. That's not necessarily a surprise for a guy who was going to go in the first round. Most likely one of the best corners in the country, and Joey Porter Jr. Came back from appendicitis, missed a couple games to play and be recognized at the Senior Bowl, the Senior Day win against Michigan State. So Penn State won't have him. Like you said, Christian Veilleur entering the portal, Rodney McGraw as well, a defensive lineman entering the portal, Jeffrey Davis, a reserve corner, entering the portal early in the process so far for Penn State. But, the heavy hitters, the players that ultimately have contributed so much to this team, Porter aside, looks like they'll be playing unless there's any change here in the next 10 days, because we get Bowl Media Day on, I believe it's December 16th. And so We'll be talking to players and coaches and everything like that. So you would expect that any opt-outs would come before that. But I don't think you're going to see too many guys missing this game, this occasion. It's going to be one I can't wait to get out there for, Bob. I know you can't either.
Yeah, and even you can tell even the odds makers aren't quite sure what to make of this game. It's right around a pick 'em, 1 point, a point and a half either way. I think at one point, it is early in December. At one point, Penn State was a slight favorite. I checked yesterday. I think Utah is now a slight favorite, but they're just really it's one of those games that you could make a strong case for both teams, winning the game. It does feel like it'll be a close game. Penn State closed the season with a 4-0 November. They played some very good teams. They won at Purdue. They won at Auburn. They played Ohio State very tough. The Michigan game did not go their way early, and they were never really in it. Utah's been tested too. So I just think that and Whittingham is one of those coaches who always seems to have his program ready for a bowl game. They can be a very, very tough out, and they're not really scared of anyone. It's going to be exciting. I'm almost hesitant to talk about potential what the team might look like, because every time we record a podcast, literally hours after it, something happens. One thing I wanted to talk to you about is it's not just the players that, Penn State could lose a couple. It's also the coaches. Like we always kind of lose track of what maybe the staff will look like, A, for the bowl game, or B, for 2023. But coaching movement, it is a big deal. Penn State had to deal with it last year. I think they're going to have to deal with it this year, maybe even on the defensive side of the ball. Especially, they could also, they've got some talented coaches on offense. How do you look at this Penn State coaching staff, a very talented staff, and who are the guys that you could see, hey, they could be back in 2023, but they're also really, really good at their jobs. They could be eyeing promotions elsewhere. When you look at the Penn State coaching staff, Johnny, who are some of the names you're going to be kind of following closely?
Yeah, I think the two big ones. The biggest one is Manny Diaz, defensive coordinator in his first year. Was a Broyles Award semifinalist, which is given to the top assistant coach in the country. And if you look at Penn State stats across the board, they're pretty much top 10, top 15 in every major defensive category. Leading the country in pass breakups, and we've talked so much this season about the aggressive mentality and just the willingness and ability to cause disruption in the back end, and a lot of that is the talent of guys like Joey Porter and Kalen King and Jair Brown, but it also comes from a mentality standpoint. Calling so much man coverage, on Manny Diaz's part, and dialing up blitzes and creating chaos in the backfield and all those good things. So he's the big one. And the other one I would say would be Jaywan Sider, the running backs coach at Penn State. And he might fly under the radar a little bit, but Penn State has had some good running backs, and he's a really, really good recruiter, and has a real lock on that South Florida area for Penn State, getting talent out of that region. The only thing there is with both of those guys, because both of those coaches were considered candidates for a couple of openings in Florida. Florida Atlantic and South Florida. Both of those jobs have been filled, which I think is good news for Penn State. Tom Herman taking FAU, and then the offensive coordinator from Tennessee took the South Florida job. So that's good news for Penn State. There's still going to be more openings, and it's not like these two guys or really anyone else on staff are limited to just going to Florida. There are openings across the country, and surely there'll be interested parties in what Penn State and James Franklin has put together on his staff. But two pieces of good news there when it comes to the coaching carousel, because it's not just the transfer portal we're covering here, Bob. It's like you said, coaches. It's everyone. Movement abound right now in December before bowl games.
Yeah. One other name I'm just going to be watching, just because I think he's really, really good at his job, is Anthony Poindexter, the safeties coach. I think he was a serious consideration for his alma mater last year, the Virginia program, where he was an All-American, just a terrific player. I think he was a 2-time All-American at safety. If he hadn't had a knee injury, he could have maybe really, really been a special player in the NFL. I look at the job, Johnny, that he's done with Penn State safeties the last couple of years. I think he got more out of Jaquan Brisker. He definitely got more out of Jair Brown with Manny Diaz's help. But I also think that Penn State safety room, they felt really good about 4 safeties. Keaton Ellis making the conversion from corner, but also, Jalen Reed and Zakee Wheatley. I think you have to give Anthony some credit on that front. And the reason I bring him up is that I just feel like he's at the point in his coaching career where his resume is impressive, and I don't think he's going to be a safeties coach for the rest of his life. I think, at some point he can lead men, he can develop men, and if it's not a head coaching job, it could be like, I know he's got a couple other titles at Penn State, but like, the defensive play caller at a program, if not the head coach. He to me is a guy that I think is fascinating. I don't know how much longer he'll be at Penn State. I think as long as he's on the staff, Penn State's defensive backfield with he and Terry Smith Penn State's in really good hands with those two. But he's just a guy that I wonder about, and I just think that eventually he's gonna get an offer that he can't refuse, and I think he's a guy that Penn State is lucky to have.
I agree. No, those are 3 guys that, like you said, right now with where Penn State's staff is, you can go back and look and see, like, James Franklin, his hiring. Hey, is that a good hire? Is that a bad hire? Whatever. These 3 guys that they have right now on staff, and other guys too, but
sure.
These are the 3 that I think that will generate a lot of interest across the country. Like you said, Poindexter almost going to Virginia last year, his alma mater, when that job opened up, and they ended up going, with Tony Elliott, the coordinator from Clemson. After a year, I don't know if that is looking like the right choice necessarily. They've had some guys transfer out, and a lot happening. In the ACC, I don't know if you saw it, Bob. There was seemingly like half of the ACC quarterbacks transferred out. On the first day of the portal. Again, the portal opening for undergraduate FBS players on Monday. So there were hundreds of players from across the country entering the portal. I don't know. I don't think Penn State's going to be getting any of those ACC quarterbacks, but maybe cornerbacks. They surely will be after a defensive back or 2 in the portal, and maybe even a wide receiver or 2. I mentioned South Florida earlier. South Florida wide receiver Jimmy Horn Jr. Putting Penn State in his 4 finalists. He's a dynamic receiver, kick returner, guy to keep an eye on in this process. Dante Thornton, wide receiver from Oregon, who was previously committed to Penn State. Maryland native is another guy to keep an eye on. Offers are flying. Penn State's involved. There's going to be some news here over the next couple weeks. And wouldn't be surprised if Penn State has a couple new players in the fold by the time we speak to James Franklin on December 16th at Bowl Media Day.
Yeah, Johnny, and I think for the fan base, I think especially at Penn State, they get excited more so than most programs. I think when Penn State adds a player in the transfer portal, I think it carries a little bit more weight just because of how successful they've been the last couple of years. they don't necessarily add a lot of players, but usually when they add a player, they've done their homework, they've targeted him, they've researched him, and they're really good at preparing that player to play a meaningful role. Almost immediately. Ebiketie obviously is the maybe the poster child for the Penn State success rate in the transfer portal. But this year, three real good players in Mitchell Tinsley and Chop Robinson, Hunter Norzad. When they add someone, I think it really get the ears of the Penn State fan base perk up. Eventually they're going to miss on a couple, but they've been really good at it, and I just think that it'll be fascinating to watch. And they're usually pretty patient with it, right? They're usually, they don't necessarily need to strike fast. They want to make sure they do their homework. So it'll be fascinating to see who leaves Penn State, who comes to Penn State. I still think, Johnny, I don't know that Penn State is completely out of the woods with regard to players leaving for the NFL draft. I think that is an ongoing thing. When the team leaves for California, I just remember last year it was a disappointing season, right? They were 7-5 and they were going to Tampa for the Outback Bowl. It was not exactly a glamour matchup, and you had a lot of players, kind of space out their decisions to opt out, starting, with Jahan Dotson and some other really, really good players. I know this is a bigger game, a bigger stage for Penn State's players who still may have something to prove. But if you want to get ready for the NFL draft and you think you've had enough of college football, you want to get training almost right away. I mean, you could literally play in the Rose Bowl and then declare right after that, because you can train out in California. That's a popular place to train. But I still think, I don't know that Penn State's out of the woods when it comes to what their roster is going to look like. But James Franklin did say, hey, he does expect, which was not the case last year. He does expect to have almost a full contingent of players available for the Utes. And usually when he says that, I think that he's real good about talking to the players and kind of where their head's at. I think he feels really good. He might lose a player or two after losing Joey, but I think he feels pretty good about most of his players are going to be in that game.
Yeah, and we talked last week about Olu Fashanu coming back. And that's a huge add to this team, to this program. Franklin not giving us I don't know if he knows even if Fashanu will be ready 100% for the Rose Bowl. He said that's still a medical issue. But we know that Joey Porter Jr. won't be playing and is no longer with the team. Aside from that, we talked this time last week about a handful of players who might be in that decision mode, like a Curtis Jacobs, players like that, and Adisa Isaac. This is an opportunity for them against a really tough and good Utah team. And like we said, this is going to be one of the most viewed bowl games of the season. This is a big stage for guys like that, hey, if you break out and really have a dominant performance on, national, and not like Penn State's not on national TV, almost every week, but, but this is different, the granddaddy of them all, the Pasadena, this is different. And so if Adisa Isaac goes out and has a great performance, or Curtis Jacobs goes out and has a great performance, Brenton Strange, guys like that, that could push them towards the NFL or the other way. We'll see. We'll see if there's any more opt-outs or any more NFL draft decisions. But given the level of talent, or I should say the projection of some of these guys that are going to be fringe making their decisions, it feels like guys who could at the very least come in, make an impact in the Rose Bowl, and then go from there. I don't know. I don't agree with that, but
yeah, no, I do agree with it. And I'll tell you, I'll give you. You mentioned him. There are going to be assuming he plays. There's going to be a lot of eyes on the Utah tight end Kincaid, who has had a fantastic 2022 season. He can do a lot of things. I don't want to say he's undersized. He's 240. He shows up though as a receiver, as a blocker. And he's had some monster games against some good teams. I'm not sure how good Pac-12 defenses are, but this guy is a formidable tight end. And the reason I bring him up, There's some sirens going on in the background here. This is Harrisburg City life for me. I don't know if you can hear that, but Penn State's tight end. There's a lot of eyes on Kincaid, Dalton Kincaid. Penn State's got some good tight ends too. They play in this game. Strange and even Theo Johnson, and they have some big moments. It might open some eyes on a bigger stage, and I think it's a great opportunity for them, especially given the fact that Penn State's passing game without Parker Washington, I think, is leaning more and more on the tight ends down the stretch, and wisely so. So, to me, the tight end position in the bowl game in general, it might be the position to watch. As good as the talent is on both sides, you're talking about 4 impact tight ends in this game if they all play, and you don't usually see that in a bowl game. And if a Brenton Strange or even a Theo Johnson has a huge game, and while there's a lot of people and maybe a lot of scouts looking at the Utah tight end, it could be a game changer for them as well. So that's another thing I think to focus on. And I think the magnitude of the bowl game probably will maybe give Penn State's players that are thinking about leaving early pause to at least say, hey, maybe I want to play in this game.
Yeah, Dalton Kincaid he's just a beast. He had, I think, 70 catches this year for Utah. I just submitted my AP All-American team
Nice.
a couple hours ago. Spoiler, he was first team. Tough between him and the kid from Notre Dame, Mayer. But, I mean, Kincaid, every time I watch Utah this year, he's making third down catches, catching touchdowns. He's going to be a problem. He's going to be a challenge for Penn State. And, again, that's maybe an opportunity for Curtis Jacobs if he gets matched up, or, Jair Brown, that, they use him down the box quite a bit. So, that's a matchup to watch in this bowl game. I also had a couple of Penn Staters on my first and second All-American team. I think we're publishing that at some point. I can't reveal the whole team, but keep an eye out for that. There's just going to be a lot of talent in this game, even without Joey Porter Jr., even if Olu Fashanu ends up not playing, if he's not medically cleared to play. We know that Parker Washington is out for the remainder of the season, so he won't be playing in this bowl game. There's still a lot of talent and a lot of reason for these guys to play, and a lot of reason for people to pay attention, and even not just pay attention, but go out and travel to the game. This was a big point of contention with the whole Ohio State Rose Bowl thing. If they didn't make the playoff, they wouldn't. I don't think they were going to sell close to their allotment of what the Rose Bowl was going to give them. And they had opt-outs last year, which I don't think sat well with the Rose Bowl. This game matters to Penn State, and it matters to Utah quite a deal too after losing last year. But first time in 6 years that Penn State's been back in Pasadena. And for a season that I had them going 9-3, so I didn't see them getting this far. There was a mixed bag in terms of expectations for this Penn State team. We all know that the stat 11-11 in the last 2 years, back-to-back disappointing years. And so for them to get here, and for a guy like Clifford or PJ Mustipher, Mitchell Tinsley even transferring in, Jair Brown to be able to close their Penn State careers in the Rose Bowls, I think it was a really cool deal. And like I mentioned earlier, just a lot of young players, and even guys like Zane Durant and Denai Dennis and Cam Miller, guys like that to be able to play in this game and have those practices and that development. It just matters so much for your program. And when you're looking ahead to 2023 and the hype train leaving the station and everything for Penn State, this could be a good launching off point for that.
Yep. Johnny McGonigal, Bob Flounders on the Blue White Breakdown podcast. Before we leave you, Penn State fans, let's just get to two things, Johnny. I wanted to talk to you about your latest. I don't know if it's your final one, but your AP 20, your 25 top 25 ballot, where you had Penn State. There was a lot of movement. Penn State didn't play, obviously, in the Big Ten title game. Utah. I mean, there were some teams that did and did well. There were some teams there were some really good championship games. I thought, not all of them, but the TCU Kansas State game was a pretty incredible game. I still can't believe the way that actually played out. But I wanted to talk to you about how you constructed your ballot, where you had Penn State, and also maybe just at the very end we could talk a little bit about, do we really feel like the 4 best teams are in the playoff?
Yeah. So my rankings were, I ended up having 1 through 4. I had Georgia, Michigan, TCU, and Ohio State. So that was in line with what the committee had. I had Tennessee 5 ahead of Alabama. That's what I've had all season. I did even before the Hooker injury. That I think it was the AP poll and even the CFP had Alabama ranked ahead of Tennessee. Tennessee beat them, so I don't for me that's if you're talking same record and all that kind of stuff. So I had Tennessee 5, Alabama 6, Clemson 7, Utah 8, USC 9, Kansas State 10. And Penn State 11. I caught a little bit of flack for moving Penn State out of the top 10. It just kind of it's nothing through their fault. Like they didn't do anything. They just didn't play on conference championship weekend. They didn't get a Power 5 conference title, and to me that matters quite a bit. I didn't want to ding USC that far, for losing and getting there. But Clemson winning in convincing fashion. Kansas State beating a really good TCU team. And Utah winning again the second time against USC. Yeah, those teams have 3 losses, but Clemson doesn't. Utah and Kansas State do. But I just felt that those kind of just really nudged them a little bit ahead of Penn State, and you can argue it. But that doesn't mean I don't think Penn State's a good team, because I think they really are, and they deserve to be in this Rose Bowl. And it's going to be really cool to see them have a top 10 matchup against Utah. The last time Penn State won a top 10 matchup, by the way, Bob, Wisconsin Big Ten title game.
Yeah.
Since the last time Penn State was in the Rose Bowl when they lost to USC, that started an 0-for-11 run against top 10 teams. So we'll see if where the drought started can be where the drought ends in LA.
I think the Penn State fan base is well aware of that mark.
No, I think it would be like narratively, it would be a little poetic if if they were able to finally end this drought. In the place where it started.
Yeah, I think the Penn State had a famous win over Oregon in the Rose Bowl, but I think in 2008 against USC, it did not go well for Penn State. I was at that game, and the 2016 game was really, really entertaining, and
it was so much fun. That was one of the most fun games I've ever. I think it was. 52-49, and the way that it happened, and Saquon Barkley, 12,000 yards in that game. Chris Godwin with the game of his life. That was a remarkable game to be at. So we can only hope that we get one similar. It's going to be tough to live up to that, but
I'll just say this one. This is just my opinion. I watched the TCU Kansas State game. My hope is, I know TCU had a great year, and they're going to square off against Michigan in the bowl game. I hope they can hang with the Michigan Wolverines. I watching them play and watching a little bit of how Alabama played this year, and Alabama does have 2 losses, two losses on the road that really came down to the end. That would be I know why the 4 are the 4. I just wonder if Alabama might be a better for a competitive game. Alabama would be a better option than maybe one of the teams that made the play. I just really hope TCU can stay with Michigan. They're a scrappy team. That quarterback just played his butt off to get back in the game against Kansas State. That's the one thing I just don't want. I don't want the semis to be blowouts. Sometimes maybe it's an indication of just how good Georgia and Michigan are. We'll see how it plays out. I want to see 2 really good semifinals. I hope we do. I'll just always be wondering about how good this Alabama team really was, given the quality of their losses. I know that they also struggled to beat some teams as well. But we'll see. And that's the beauty, right, of having this. And there's always going to be arguments, and there's always people that are going to feel differently. I hope TCU really, really, really pushes Michigan to the limit.
Bob, I'm going to go on the record here, and after ranking Michigan number 2, you think, okay, how does that make any sense? Well, resume-wise, they haven't lost, etc.
Yep.
I think TCU is going to beat Michigan.
Okay, all right.
I love what I've seen from Max Duggan. As long as he doesn't have 9 broken ribs, because that guy took so many hits. Yeah. He took so many hits against Kansas State. He's such a game. I think TCU can get it done. I really think. I like Sonny Dykes as a coach, and without Blake Corum out for the year, people might say, "Oh yeah, Donovan Edwards, they're able to move past that." And they very well might. And Michigan's going to be favored by 9-10 points for a reason. I'm not sure where that line is right now. There's a reason why Michigan's favored. I think TCU, people are going to be overlooking it and getting a little ahead of themselves and saying, hey, if Ohio State can upset, Georgia, then we're going to get Ohio State, Michigan in the national title. I think TCU gets a job done.
Yeah. And I think Ohio State, we saw Ohio State against Penn State, and the final score said 44-31 Ohio State, but that was a game that could have easily ended up as a W for Penn State. And Georgia's athletes, the size of Georgia's athletes on just about every position, Ohio State better pack a lunch. I know that they're extremely talented on the offensive end. I think they have questions on the defensive side. And if Georgia finds a weakness on you, they're going to exploit it. They're a very explosive team, and they can beat you in about 15 different ways. I'm sure Ohio State's is happy they're in the playoff. I don't know how happy they're going to be after spending 3 hours with the Georgia Bulldogs. But you know what? There are a lot of people that thought that Ohio State, was maybe the best team in the country with a month to go in the regular season. I think that makes that matchup even all the more interesting. Do you give Ohio State a mulligan for what happened at home against Michigan? I don't. But do you think if they have an A game, is it anywhere near Georgia's A game?
I mean, it can be. Not having Jackson Smith and Jigba hurts. He's out for the playoff. He's focusing on the NFL, and he's been injured. So having one of the best receivers in the country, they haven't really had him all year. But not having him against Georgia, I thought that there might be a chance that he would just come back for the playoffs, but that's not the case. It's going to be difficult. Now they still have Marvin Harrison Jr., they still have Emeka Egbuka, and Julian Fleming as a deep threat. I just don't think this Ohio State defense is necessarily ready for the physicality of Georgia's offense when it wants to be physical and it wants to impose themselves. And then this Georgia defense, I think DeJuan Jones and Paris Johnson are two of the best tackles in college football for Ohio State, but they're going to have their hands full. Yeah. And I feel like this is going to be a game where Jalen Carter could eat on the inside, and CJ Stroud's going to be running for his life quite a bit. So, I think Georgia is, again, if you put talent, just team A, team B in terms of talent composites and all that kind of stuff, Ohio State ranks up with them, but just the way that Ohio State just hasn't been able to put it all together this year, I don't think it bodes well that you're going in off of a point, after a loss by 1 million points, and then you got to go play Georgia. It doesn't bode well.
Yeah, Ryan Day's seat was warm after the Michigan game. If they get blowed out by Georgia, I mean, it's not a very forgiving crowd in Columbus. The bar is so high that if they would lose the last 2 games of their season, by double digits, handily, it'll get real nasty
which sounds crazy though. That sounds crazy because they're 11-1. They're in the playoff. 126 other teams, 128 other teams in the country would kill for that year in, to be in that conversation and those expectations to be that high. But Ohio State fans have been spoiled in in a good way, I guess, for them that they feel like they can have that expectation that high.
Yeah, I do.
It would have been really interesting. It would have been really interesting if the committee would have bumped. I don't think it would have been the right thing to do, but they bumped TCU down to 4, but Ohio State 3.
I was rooting for that.
Ohio State, Michigan, and then if Ohio State lost again by 15, 20, 25 points, man, Ryan Day wouldn't have a home to go back to. That thing would be burned down. So that would have been really interesting. And if we get a Michigan-Ohio State national title game, it's going to be really interesting. I don't think it's going to happen. But we'll have to see. That's why they play the games. That's why Alabama wasn't in. They play the games. They lost twice.
Yeah, that's true. It's early December. There's so much to talk about. Things change on an hourly basis in college football, whether it's the transfer portal, declarations for the NFL draft, coaches on the move. Deion Sanders is in Colorado shaking things up. It's a wild. The NIL deals, it's just wild. You talked about all the quarterbacks leaving the first day of the transfer portal. Every time you take a breath or every time you turn around, Johnny, something else Something else is happening. I'm sure after we sign off here on lunchtime, Tuesday, December 6th, by the end of the day, there's going to be something impacting Penn State's program. We'll be ready for it, but it's hard to see it coming. All I know is it is definitely coming. You just don't know who's leaving, who's staying, but we'll be there to have coverage of it. Get ready for Bowl Media Day. Get ready for early signing day, which is technically basically just signing day in late December, and then leave for the bowl trip. Johnny, it's going to be – you still got the World Cup football, not soccer, football to worry about. You got your birds to worry about. What a month for you. What a month for Penn State football. I'm looking forward to it. I know you are as well.
Absolutely.